Ladies and gentlemen, and fellow young leaders, my name is Marte Silkoski, and I work at the Norwegian Atlantic Committee. It is my honor to introduce to you the next speaker, the Norwegian Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Børge Brende. First and foremost, I'd like to thank the Norwegian Ministry of Foreign Affairs on behalf of the young leaders for contributing to this program and for allowing us to gather here today. It wouldn't have been able to do this without you. Let me tell you a little bit about Mr. Brende's background. He's been Foreign Minister for just under a year, but is no newcomer to Norwegian politics. He was seen as a political talent from early age and first took office as Minister of Climate and Environment in 2001, a job he did so well that he was described as a conservative even the Social Democrats could like. He then served as Minister of Trade and Commerce and has later worked as Managing Director of the World Economic Forum and was headhunted to the Norwegian Red Cross before he was headhunted back to the World Economic Forum. It caused quite a bit of outcry when he left politics for the international organizations, and rumor has it that he found it a bit difficult to leave politics himself. Well, we are very happy to have you back in politics, and especially in this period of time when we take office in NATO and we have our former Prime Minister as the Secretary General. And we're very excited to see how Norway is going to do in this position, and we look forward to hearing your remarks. So please welcome on the stage the Norwegian Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Børge Brende.
Good morning. It's great to be here with you. I'm also looking forward to the interactive session after my few opening remarks. I'm tempted to say their future colleagues and their members of the transatlantic family. Early on in my political career, too, I was very active in Atlantic issues and the Council of Atlantic issues in Norway. I also would like to thank the Atlantic Council for this initiative. I think it's very timely, and it's taking place against the backdrop when it comes to the security situation that is changing very fastly. If you a year ago had said that in the heart of Europe you would have seen one European country taking a piece of another European country, not disregarding international law and also the UN Charter, I think people would say that what you base this on. And if you a year ago had said that there will be a situation unfolding at a NATO country's border, Turkey, with Syria and Iraq, where you would have an extremist organization that was expelled from Al-Qaeda because they were too brutal and barbaric and too extreme, controlling not a small territory, but almost from Aleppo in northwest of Syria to Mosul, 100 kilometers away from Baghdad, and 20 kilometers away from Erbil. Even if they're pushed back a bit there, no. People would say, what are you talking about? I think what the clear message is, and that has always been my message as long as I've been in politics, is that NATO and defense is there to secure and protect our basic values and sovereignty and territorial integrity. And this is the right insurance for also facing not so predictable threats. And things are changing very, very fastly. And I think we are facing a situation where we also see new kind of military challenges not the traditional ones, and I don't think we have been totally prepared for it. Look at Ukraine. This kind of hybrid, asymmetric warfare where you deny that you are present in the area you're planning maybe then an annexation of until it's a reality, has also challenged the West and the media. And I took note of Mr. Putin yesterday, and today are now talking about a ceasefire for Donbass, Lugansk, and Donetsk. And of course, this is very interesting. I'm just a little bit puzzled that before raising this idea now of a ceasefire, where we have seen 2 steps forward and 2 steps back for the last months, this happened after the last week, where we have seen more weapons being sent over the border, and also where we can document that and we can confirm that there are Russian military personnel in Donbass. Of course, we take this invitation and we will also continue to discuss this seriously with Russia and Mr. Putin. But I think the litmus test on the sincerity here is that if you see changes on the ground, that action follows words. And of course, this is timely discussion to bring up the day before the NATO summit. But I'm sure that we at this NATO summit will be very, very clear that it's only action on the ground that now counts for us in this respect. Looking back, I think Churchill once said that the farther backward you can look, the farther forward you're likely to see. So let's have a look at the alliance, the NATO alliance. In my view, the most successful military alliance in the history. I think that NATO's greatest success was to win the Cold War without war. And together with the European Union, we went on to win the peace as well. I strongly believe that our partnerships have secured democracy and stability on this continent, and 12 partners have now become allies. I think today this alliance is once again called upon to demonstrate its historic ability to adapt a changing security landscape. We face challenges, as I said, that we did not anticipate 1 year ago. Russia's aggressive actions in Ukraine and the terrorist threat from ISIS in Iraq and Syria represent fundamental challenges to the common values of NATO and our friends and partners. I think also the situation the last years have shown us what conflict and war leads to. Let's look at Syria. 3 years ago, Syria was a middle-income country where refugees from the region was fleeing to Syria. 3 years later, Syria is a country where we have a humanitarian catastrophe. 200,000 people have been killed, and we know that there are a lost generation of children now growing up in Syria without any access, millions of children not having access to education, children facing malnutrition, and we also have a record of refugees coming from Syria. In fact, the deteriorating situation now in Iraq and Syria has led to the worst refugee crisis since the Second World War. This has taught us the lesson that to invest in peace and invest in development and invest in human rights and invest in those things that are necessary for wars not to happen is the best investment you can ever do. We have no examples of countries in the world where there is war and conflicts that have met any of the Millennium Development Goals when it comes to development. Looking now at the situation in Syria, Iraq, I think there are many really wondering how should we cope with this? Is it really possible to face ISIS and the threat, and in what way should we do this? I was in Iraq last week in Baghdad and in Erbil. I also been visiting refugees coming out of Syria. I think that we are now seeing a change in the dynamics. If you, a month ago, had said that the Iranians would let Maliki go, that would not be so realistic. The Iranians let Maliki go and accepted that Mr. Abadi will try to form a more inclusive government. What we need in Iraq very fastly is an inclusive government that also brings in fully, of course, the Kurdish people, but even more important, the moderate Sunnis that do exist. And due to the polarizing policy of Mr. Maliki, the Sunnis has ended in a situation where they have not been fighting back the way we would have expected ISIS. So with an inclusive government that also now includes the moderate Sunnis, I think this is moving in the right direction. And I think what we need is the Gulf countries and the Arab countries now also realizing that the proxy war that has been going on in Syria and has been spreading to Iraq needs to end. And the Arabs and the Gulf countries have to be part of now an alliance that will fight ISIS based on an inclusive government in Iraq. And then we need to again take up Geneva I and Geneva II, and hopefully based on the realization of the fundamental threat that ISIS is for the stability of the whole region, we will also see changes in Syria, and especially from Iran and hopefully Russia, so we can see a moderate government in the future, including moderates from the moderate opposition and parts of the Assad regime, excluding Mr. Assad himself. He has too much blood on his hands. And this moderate, inclusive government coming together can be the basis for then fighting ISIS from the Syrian side. And if you have this happening, fighting from Iraq and Syria, I think this is the realistic way to also push then ISIS back, because this cannot continue. I think this was supposed to be an interactive session, and I had a manuscript but chose not to stick to it. I don't know. I think we will. I'm happy to take questions and comments, but I think, as I was saying also when I arrived a year ago, when I less than a year ago took office as the foreign minister, people were asking, is this Wales summit really summit worthy? That was the discussion less than a year ago. And looking at the agenda we are having at this meeting and the challenges that we are facing, I think the relevance of NATO, not only as a military alliance, but as a political alliance with new members, but also with partners, and an alliance where we have values in common, important values, democracy, freedom of speech, and etc., is what is keeping this alliance together, and also will keep this and secure this alliance as very strong also in the years to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. My name is Lars Hansen. I will be moderating this session. I'm part of the Emerging Leaders Group with the Atlantic Council, and I've also just rejoined the Norwegian Ministry of Foreign Affairs as a diplomat, so I'm actually here moderating my boss. So, and I will try.
That was not a prerequisite for my participation.
So I will try to behave. I'll pick up first, Mr. Minister, on the topic of Ukraine that you mentioned. At the beginning of this week, at the time when we were actually together in Ukraine, the New York Times ran an op-ed entitled simply, "Arm Ukraine or Surrender." The argument there is pretty tight, that yes, the risks entailed if you arm Ukraine are great, but we must not think that defeat for Ukraine is not a defeat for us. Do you not think, Mr. Minister, we are now guilty in Ukraine and other places of underestimating the risks to ourselves of doing too little?
I think that we as the West and NATO has been extremely firm when it comes to Ukraine. I think since Ukraine is not a NATO member but a partner, it's not part of the Article 5, then what we have done since this Russian aggression has been very, very firm. The sanctions that are introduced is definitely felt in Moscow. The Russian economy is now is contracting. I think also our political support for Mr. Poroshenko has been very clear. I think the West, after Mr. Yanukovych had to leave office, has supported this process very, very strongly. I think realistically there has to be a political solution for the eastern part of Ukraine. I think the Crimea is a case in itself, but no, on eastern Ukraine, we also know that this is a totally different situation for Russia and Mr. Putin. There is not the same sentiment even in Lugansk and in Donetsk as they were seeing in Crimea. And we know that the last 2 weeks, until a few days ago, there was also the military effort and initiative from Mr. Poroshenko's side was going quite well. But obviously, Mr. Putin was not willing to accept this. So the answer to a situation where we saw that the pro-Russian separatists were almost losing was that there were more weapons sent over the border. And we also have seen now Russian military personnel in the eastern part of Ukraine. I think that overall, the big loser in this situation is Russia and Mr. Putin. He's lost the sympathy of most of the people in Ukraine. When I spoke at the University of Kiev that was started and inaugurated in 1834 on Monday, I would say that 90% of the students were very supportive of the policy of its government. Most of the people of Ukraine are now supporting the line of Mr. Poroshenko, and I think it will end, and hopefully will do so, in a political solution where Russia has to contribute in disarming the separatists, stop sending arms, stop sending soldiers, but where we will also see a special, we have to find a way of more regional influence for the region of Donbass.
I really would like to open this up for some questions. We have very limited time, so please keep your questions concise as far as you can. Yes, please.
Thank you very much. Fantastic. Thank you very much, Mr. Minister, for coming over and addressing us. My question regards the situation in Syria and the greater Middle East that you touched upon. The reticence of Western powers to become engaged in the Syrian situation led to a lively debate within academia on the demise, if not the end, of the responsibility to protect. And I was wondering, what is your take if the R2P principle is to be considered gone, and in case, what is going to be replacing that as a guiding principle of larger power vis-a-vis humanitarian crisis? Thank you.
Thank you. Let's take one more just here.
Hi, Katja Gershak from Slovenia. Can we just return to Russia for a moment? I would like to hear your view. And you know, for a number of European countries, the relations with Russia have a number of dimensions, from economic to energy. And that's also a result of the partnership that we've been building with Russia over the past decades. So how do you see this after the crisis, after hopefully the political agreement comes? How do you see the relationship with Russia continuing from your point of view?
And thank you. And we have one last at the back here.
Thank you, Mr. Minister, for your very insightful remarks. Going back to the Middle East, I was pleasantly surprised to hear that there was an anti-ISIS rally in Oslo about a week and a half ago. So I'd love to hear more about your perspective about how that came to be, and whether that was a concentrated effort on your part to engage the Muslim minority in countering some of the radical messages that ISIS is putting out. Secondly, I'd like to understand your perspective on what NATO can do to bring together a sort of coalition of Muslim countries that can intervene. It's interesting how pro and anti-Assad countries are now united on this ISIS issue. And isn't it about time the Western world put an effort into doing some sort of conference and bringing them together with decisive action?
So let me start with the last question. I think it's very important to know when we were starting to fight back ISIS, that we also build, as I said in my remarks, with an alliance with the Arab world and with the Gulf countries. I think the only effective way of fighting ISIS need to be based on an inclusive government in Iraq and a new government in Syria that is based on moderate forces. And they are there, both in Iraq and also in Syria. And we cannot be successful in fighting ISIS without also been basing this on the moderate forces both in Iraq and Syria. So there needs to be a political base for this. Of course, when we saw what was taking place in close to Erbil, we had no choice. ISIS was in a situation where they could even bring down the whole of Kurdistan. And this we could not see happen. So it was a combination of the US Air Force together with the Peshmergas and also the Iraqi army. But to change the dynamics now, where 1/3 of Iraq is occupied by ISIS, 12 million Iraqis are living under the appalling rule of ISIS, we need to make sure that this fight is based on full support from the Gulf countries and also the Arab countries, and not at least the Sunnis themselves. Because if it's not done in that way, we can again face a catastrophe in some years. And this is what we have seen happening in Iraq. I also was very pleased what we saw in Oslo, where a lot of people from different diasporas, Muslim diasporas, initiated a demonstration against extremism and ISIS. And I hope this will also, we will see more examples of this in other cities. On Russia after the crisis, let's now see if there is a ceasefire and there is a peace plan for the eastern part of Ukraine. The challenge has been during the last months, as I said, there has been a lot of talking, but less delivery. There are different scenarios. I think, unfortunately, one of them being that we can see a continuation of what is now taking place in Donbass. And of course, that will weaken the new leadership in Kiev, because all their focus is now on fighting the pro-Russian separatists. A lot of money is going to this. And we know that if Ukraine is going to be successful, they need to start with economic reforms. They have to start to fight corruption and all this. And the opportunities in Ukraine are great. In 1989, the GDP per capita in Poland and in Ukraine was the same. And today it's 3 times higher in Poland. And this is due to reforms, of course, also with collaboration with the European Union and all this. So Poroshenko needs to have a real chance to start the job. Someone could think, of course, that with this destabilization situation going on, that can weaken the political leadership in Kiev, and in the future the frustration can become so big that there will again be easier to have a pro-Russian president in Kiev. But my point was, in what I said, and with the people that I have met now in Ukraine, people are very, very unhappy with what has taken place. And it's very interesting to see that the people in Ukraine is really asking Poroshenko to be tougher in eastern parts of Ukraine. And he's tried, and we saw the result of that. That was then Russian soldiers supporting the pro-Russian separatists. That shows that we need to have a ceasefire, and this should be then the basis of finding the modus operandi.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. I know your schedule is very tight, so we will have to let you go. Just let me abuse my role as a moderator a little bit before we end it. You said that we should just judge Russia by its actions and not by its words. And I guess they will do the same to us, so to say. So what are the actions or the agreements you hope will come out of this meeting?
I think on the Ukrainian situation, I think the key to unlocking this situation is totally with Mr. Putin. No, he can just stop sending arms over the border. He can stop sending Russian soldiers. And then I think NATO and Europe and Ukraine will factor that in when you see this happening on the ground. I think what NATO is now doing with reassurance and also deterrence is something that is only natural to do in general, but especially in such a situation that is now created.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much to you all. Please join me then in thanking the Minister for his remarks. Thank you.